You know what's strange? We constantly talk about boomers. We analyze millennials. We obsess over Gen Z like they're a brand new species. But there's one generation that just exists in the background. Quiet, unbothered, almost invisible. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980. The ones who built the digital world, but don't feel the need to show their lives inside it. And here's the truth no one really talks about. Their psychology isn't boring. It's just deeply misunderstood. Let's start here. They were raised alone. Not emotionally, literally. By the early 1980s, millions of kids were coming home to empty houses every day. No texts, no check-ins, no "did you reach home?" Just a key and silence. They were called latchkey kids, and that experience rewired something fundamental. They learned independence before they learned comfort. Cooking for themselves at 9, solving problems without help, handling fear, quietly. And when you grow up like that, you stop expecting someone to save you. Second, their brains are wired for consequences. Gen X didn't grow up negotiating rules. They grew up experiencing them. Mess up, you deal with it immediately. Psychologists call this a high contingency environment, where actions and consequences are tightly linked. The result? They naturally think ahead. They calculate risks faster. They don't romanticize decisions. While others ask, "What do I feel?" Gen X asks, "What happens next?" Third, they don't trust systems. They trust themselves. They were raised on promises like, "Work hard, stay loyal, everything will work out." Then they watched. Divorce rates spike, mass layoffs hit loyal workers, corporations replace people overnight. So they adapted, not with rebellion, but with realism. Psychologists sometimes call it defensive pessimism, expecting things to go wrong so you're never caught off guard. But to Gen X, that's just being prepared.
Fourth, they treat privacy like protection, not preference. Before social media, mistakes weren't permanent. You messed up, maybe 5 people knew. Then life moved on. No screenshots, no viral moments, no digital record haunting you forever. So when Gen X sees people posting everything today, their instinct isn't excitement, it's caution. Why would you expose yourself like that? For them, privacy isn't hiding, it's safety. Fifth, humor is their emotional armor. Gen X didn't grow up in a calm world. They lived through Cold War anxiety, nuclear drills in classrooms, adults casually talking about what if everything ends. Imagine being told the world could end, but also being told not to worry about it. So they adapted in a unique way. They learned to hold fear and joke about it at the same time. Sarcasm, irony, dark humor. Not for attention, but for survival. Sixth, they don't perform work, they execute it. Before fancy resumes and LinkedIn posts, Gen X had jobs that threw them straight into reality. Delivering newspapers before sunrise, handling cash without calculators, fixing things because no one else would. These weren't side hustles, they were early lessons in responsibility. So now, they don't talk about productivity, they don't post about hustle, they just show up and deliver. Because for them, competence is louder than content. Seventh, they're independent but quietly loyal. Here's the paradox. They'll rarely ask for help, but they'll always show up when you need it. Why? Because growing up, friends became family. When parents weren't around, they relied on each other. So they built bonds that weren't loud, but were unbreakable. Eighth, they respect skill, not status. Titles don't impress them. Competence does. They grew up watching authority fail, from political scandals to public crises handled poorly. So now, if you're good at what you do, they respect you. If you're not, your title means nothing. No ego, just evaluation.
Ninth, they're financially cautious for a reason. Gen X didn't just face one crisis. They faced multiple. Economic instability in early careers, the dot-com crash, the 2008 financial crisis. That does something to your mindset. They don't trust stability. They build backups. They prepare for disruption. Not because they're paranoid, but because they've seen how fast things collapse. 10th, they're strong, but not always open. Research shows Gen X is less likely to seek emotional support during stress, not because they don't need it, but because they were trained not to rely on it. Handle it yourself. That mindset made them resilient, but sometimes isolated. And here's the part no one talks about enough. They grew up in a world where information was hard to get. You didn't Google answers, you searched for them. Libraries, card catalogs, hours of effort for one piece of knowledge. And that changed how they think. They value information more, they remember it longer, they trust what they've earned, not what's instantly available. Now they're watching a completely different generation grow up. Constant attention, constant validation, constant visibility. And deep down, there's a quiet concern. Is this strength or dependency? Because in their world, being visible meant being vulnerable. So what is Gen X really? They're not louder, they're not softer. There's something else entirely. A generation raised between two worlds. Analog childhood, digital adulthood. Independence forced early, stability never guaranteed. They became the bridge. And bridges don't demand attention. They just hold everything together, quietly, reliably, without needing to be seen. And maybe that's their real power. They don't need recognition because they've already built something stronger than that. Self-reliance. If this made you see people differently, stay here, because we don't just talk about generations, we understand the psychology behind them.